Now we're going to be moving on to our next and final speaker who will be speaking on our next and final topic. So our final speaker for today is going to be Zak Lambert, who is working at Growth for Plaid here in the UK. So Plaid is originally an American company that offers an API to help people basically consume more easily, to make money easier for both consumers, banks, and then third parties. So if you've ever used Monzo, TransferWise, or Coinbase, it's actually very possible that you've used Plaid yourself without knowing it. They work on the back end, allowing consumers, banks to connect to the services that they might want to use. So here to tell us more about Plaid and what open banking is and how Plaid fits into that in general, Zak Lambert, please welcome. Hi, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So thank you for being here. Super exciting to have you on. I'm personally very interested in open banking. I have a Revolut account. I have a Monzo account, and I'm just really interested in the ways that, we can move away from some of the more cumbersome processes that we used to have into a more flexible, dynamic way of spending as a consumer. So I'd love for you to quickly describe what it is exactly Plaid does in your own words. I gave a brief introduction earlier.
Yes, you did a good job. At a high level, Plaid is a routing layer for fintech. So our job, as you said, is to make money easier for everyone. So we act as the central point that connects your bank account to the things that need to use it for whatever they need to use it for. So whether that's to add money to an account that you have or to view your transactions and help you budget, we want to let the companies that do those things focus on doing those things and handle the actual piece of connecting the bank accounts ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really easy to forget because it's on the back end, the scale of what you guys do. You guys have already analyzed over 10 billion transactions. Am I right in saying that? So there's some numbers happening.
Yeah. I think at this point, about 1 in 4 consumers in the US have connected a bank account with Plaid. And we work with about 80% of what we call the fintech market. So folks that are also aligned with our mission in helping end users, whether that's in like a B2B case or an investing case like eToro or something else along those lines.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. So I mentioned earlier open banking, and I don't think I ever defined exactly what that was. Do you think you could do that for me? And then what exactly Plaid does, although I suppose it might be a little bit self-explanatory, but what Plaid does to fit into that?
Yeah, no problem. So open banking is at a high level the UK specific implementation of PSD2, which is a regulatory package. The basic driving force behind open banking is the idea that consumers own their data. They should be able to do what they want with it, and they should be able to permission it safely and securely to the apps that need it to use things to make their lives better. So it's a standard that banks have built to say, hey, we will open up our data to anyone that can consume our API is regulated and works in the industry. And Plaid takes that data, simplifies it down to a set of a few APIs. And then routes it back out to our client base.
Okay. So if I'm just a consumer, could you give me an example of what open banking has changed between how I would do anything before and then what my life looks like now? Like just an example.
Yeah, sure. So if I used, Clio, for instance, to help me budget and to set my weekly expenses, before open banking, I wouldn't have been able to authenticate directly with the institution. I might have had to remember a few different credential fields, and the institution's connection might have been somewhat brittle before the regulatory package. Mm-hmm. Now I'm able to authenticate in the app directly, redirect to my Revolut or my Monzo banking app, and connect my account to Clio that way so that they can manage my finances on the back end.
Mm-hmm. So just to summarize, I give consent to my bank, and then my bank is just giving, any of the services or products I use direct access instead of having to wait and, I have to authenticate every time, right?
Right, or like uploading spreadsheets of transactional data. It's a clear consent that lives directly with the bank, so that you don't have to think about the actual process of connecting your account to anything. And you can just focus on like the pure value prop of what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. And so you mentioned that open banking is the UK implementation of PSD2. Could you explain to people who might not know what PSD2 is, and then how that differentiates from, the environment in the US, for instance, which is your native environment?
Yeah. So definitely moved over from the US in April of last year. So I've been here for a bit now learning about PSD2 and various European regulatory packages. PSD2 is basically something that, as I was saying, codifies the right that consumers have to own their own data, right? It's not owned by banks. It's not owned by us. It's not owned by any of our clients using it. It's owned by the consumer to do what they want to do with it. PSD2 really codified that and put down in legislation that consumers and small businesses alike have the right to access their banking data, that it's theirs and they can do what they want with it. So PSD2 itself writes that somewhat at length, being a legislative document, but that's the core principle. It was an awesome foundation for fintech. The concept of consumers owning their own checking and current and savings accounts and being able to do what they want with it is super helpful. And we really see it as like a first step toward part two. So we have open banking right now. We would like to have open finance down the road. So not just your current and savings account, but your investment accounts, any types of debt that you might have. Anything else that, a creative value proposition by a developer who could do something to make your life a bit easier could work with. Okay, cool. So, well, that's great to know. Personally, I was born and raised in Europe. I don't sound like it, but I am actually a European. And I've got to wonder, it's so handy that that's codified into law here. Is that the case in America, or do you have to work differently over there? Yeah, so it's not the case in North America. Open banking is something of an uppercase concept in Europe, and it has already gone through the legislature. I think the conversations around lowercase open banking are evolving in the US and Canada. And it's not like at the same point in regulation right now. So there's nothing really strictly guaranteeing the right to access your data in the US like there is in Europe. And like that specific foundation of regulatory clarity has been really helpful here. Okay, cool. Well, then I'd love to move on to a little bit, because PSD2 has been implemented for not that long, but I guess in terms of financial regulation, it's been practically decades. It moves very quickly. But I'd love to talk about, we're all currently in the midst of this pandemic, obviously different stages depending on where people might be. But I'm wondering, Hello. Sorry about that. Oh, no. I've cut out a little bit. I'll just ask that again. But, everyone has to deal with unreliable Wi-Fi to a greater extent the last few weeks. Definitely the case. It's not easy. But as I was saying before I was conveniently cut in, but I'm wondering, how does this pandemic influence the work you guys, hopefully not just unreliable Wi-Fi? Yeah, definitely that is definitely an element. I think we see this as like an acceleration of a few trends that were already happening, right? Habits don't change overnight. They typically take many years to change. This is a scenario that compresses many years into quite a small number of months. So, consumers rely on a vast sort of world of different things to manage their personal finances. One large part of that that young people don't typically think about is the bank branch. Most bank branches are closed right now. So the minds of consumers that have like a set process and have done something for the same way for a long time are now completely confused and need to change that. So we're seeing adoption increase at a faster rate than would be the case in a world without COVID. And then the other main point is that the trend of everything becoming a fintech is accelerating somewhat. Like I said, there's a huge market opportunity since all of the services that are traditionally offered like in person via branch or via some defined process that you at some point in your life used are changing. The way that you spend money is changing. So in much the same way, it is a new experience for people that shop in a grocery store to order that online. The payments world is changing similarly.
Okay, that's really interesting to hear that it's actually speeding up adoption, which I'm sure for a lot of us already using services like Revolut or Monzo, maybe it wasn't something that we were thinking about. But I guess this is impacting more those other demographics that were hanging on until now they physically can't anymore. Would you say that there's a difference between, in the UK and the US, the areas that you're familiar with so far? Like, is there a difference in adoption? Would you say someone's faster than someone else?
I wouldn't say that like one market is particularly faster than another. I will say that like one trend that you're seeing right now is that a lot of neobanks formed in Europe and are currently looking to open in North America and the US. So they're getting themselves familiar with the market and the regulations, and might have a decent opportunity to really build their brand and start to get familiar with who their customer base will be. Since a lot of the people that are opening their first bank account right now won't have access to do so at the branch that maybe their mom and dad did in the years before.
Yeah. And since you guys do most of your work basically working with, startups and fintechs that tend to be smaller, do you think that in this environment where money is a lot tighter, it might be tougher to source investments, or it might be tougher for people who have ideas, who want to start companies to start them? Do you think that you're going to struggle in the fintech space in general rather than just Plaid? But do you think we're going to start to see a slowing in the rate of new fintechs and new ideas?
I don't necessarily think we're going to see a slowing in the rate of new ideas. I think we're at a pretty fertile ground right now for new ideas, specifically in that like the day-to-day operations of our lives have changed in a way that they hadn't changed in the years prior. So there are a lot of things that we now need to do that just weren't needed before. And a lot of those things have to do with finances. If you look at like small business loan administrations and the speed to disbursement of those, that's one place where we're actually seeing more fintech adoption, and smaller companies are sort of disrupting larger incumbent banks in the lending space there. Because for economic stimulus in the US and the UK, a really key element of that was like, how quickly can you get money out the door to qualified customers? And to no one's surprise, after thinking about that for a bit, a lot of the smaller, more nimble, non-bank fintechs were the ones that were really well equipped to do that. So I don't think there's necessarily a dearth of new fintech ideas out there. I think they just might take place in a slightly different manner than they would have otherwise.
Okay. And since you guys are working with so many companies at the same time, I'm curious, is there a particular industry? Like right now we're talking about neobanks, but do you think there's space for other types of innovation where Plaid might be useful other than just, consumer retail? Or what do you think that looks like for you guys?
Yeah, certainly. And it's hard for us to pick what that actually is. I would say one thing that we are quite militant about is supporting all use cases that potentially live on top of our platform equally. We don't pick verticals. We try to serve all of our customers. And the way that our product roadmap ultimately gets made is in listening to what those customers ask of us. So if we see a trend in like asks across customers, across verticals, that might be something we get more involved in over time. But nothing particular.
Okay, cool. That's kind of interesting to hear that you guys are basically just open to working with anything that might be useful, like any applications that people might find useful to see you guys in. Yeah,
I think the bank account is the hub of your life. That sounds obvious to say, but it operates in ways that you typically don't think about. Right. And you need to connect it to a lot of different things to make a lot of different elements of your life come together. So you need to use Monzo to pay your friends when you guys go to a restaurant, when you're able to go to a restaurant. If you also needed to run a small business, you would need to connect to some type of accounting software to do that. That could help you with things like tax and payroll. And then, you also needed to watch your investments and put money into the market. So all of those things look super, super different on surface level. If you dig down a couple of layers, they all require pretty similar functionality in terms of like needing to know certain things about your bank account. So they look fairly similar to us inside out, but the consumer facing props are very different.
Okay, that's interesting. And so before we were speaking a little bit about how the environment might be different from a regulatory standpoint in Europe versus in the US. And I'm kind of curious to know, since you're working specifically at Growth, is there a difference in the way that Plaid has been approaching driving growth in the UK or in the rest of Europe as compared to the strategies initially in the United States where you first, were conceived?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think one of the things that we consider more now than we did or than we currently do in the US is that we are a much smaller player here. So we are able to move pretty quickly because we are new here. We are able to listen to our customers pretty quickly, again, because we don't have the same 1 in 4 users have connected their bank accounts statistic that we have in the US. So I think the two pillars of that, of driving growth, are one, listening to our customers, figuring out what they want. We get really, really good feedback from small companies and big companies. It's not like a given for us that a 1,000 person company will have better ideas on what to build for us than a 1 person company. We take all the feedback we get pretty seriously. And then, like we were just talking about, now is a great time for new fintech products to be created, right? There are use cases open that haven't for a long period of time. And the hardest thing to do in like driving new product creation and figuring out what to build next is changing consumer habits. That is just not a thing that you can count on. But consumer habits have been changed by forces out of our control. So I'm excited to see what comes on top of that.
That will be interesting to see. And as you are coming in, we were speaking to an earlier speaker a little bit about companies that are growing a lot and they struggle with things like hiring in space. I've seen that you guys are hiring. Do you think that is hiring going to be like a really big point for you guys as you continue to expand into the UK and Europe?
Yeah, definitely. Hiring is really, really important to us. Everyone takes it very, very seriously and spends a lot of time on interviews and giving feedback and sourcing the right people. And then again, we listen to our customers in product development. We also realize that we need to listen to the markets that we're in terms of who to ask and where to build those products, right? So hiring people that are familiar with the UK landscape is important and have been in Europe for a long time is great. So just finding the right mix of people that come in and have the right backgrounds and ask the right questions.
Sorry about that. My Wi-Fi has let me down again, which is fun. But sorry, I didn't hear the tail end of that, but I got that you guys are focusing on that a lot and trying to listen to, trying to adapt to the current market. So you're looking for people who have some idea of what the landscape looks like in the UK as well as in Europe. So I'm wondering, is that like something you would look at, for instance, for a lot of people who are watching might be students and they're considering, what do I need to be learning? What skills do I need to have? What interests do I need to have? Would you be looking for someone who tends to spend a lot of time learning about their environment, wondering about technology and innovation? What kind of thing would you be looking into?
Yeah, to be honest, it varies a little bit case by case. No individual candidate is the same. We're just looking for people that are curious, are smart, and maybe have an interest in Plaid and what we do. So we're always willing to have a conversation with people that apply and sort of talk about what the market looks like.
Okay, and you did mention that consumer habits are changing. Do you think that is probably the biggest way that adoption will be pushed forward? It'll be through this particular thing? Or do you think that consumer habits will change really gradually, and then by the end of it, this won't be really a distinguishable factor?
Yeah. So top line, I don't know. We can have sort of suspicions about that. I don't think that like post COVID, the bank branch will just like forever change and they will never reopen. I do think now is a great time for all of our customers and the companies that we work with to have a chance to prove the value that they offer to users that might not have considered them before, right? Like the apps that sit on top of us all have calling cards. They all make someone's life easier or save them money or save them time. And they're able to do that for like their user base that they acquire. And that denominator for like people available looking for services to make their financial lives easier right now is much bigger than it has been maybe in more normal times.
So would you say that more regulation is necessary, or do you think, like you're saying, you know, people are kind of adopting new technologies as it happens, and then this is kind of helpful for that? Or do you think that regulation as it stands here, like with PSD2, do you think that that's kind of got just like the perfect environment, or is there more adapting that regulators need?
Yeah, definitely. It's sort of the thing that we talked about at the beginning. Open banking is awesome, and it is great that consumers have reliable access to their current and savings accounts. We sort of see that as like an evolutionary trend in that like today they are able to manage their current account and their savings account. Tomorrow, you know, it should be enshrined that they're able to manage all of their finances. It shouldn't matter whether those are current accounts, investment accounts, student debt. You know, we really believe strongly in the ability of consumers to own their data and for developers to have the ability to build things that benefit those consumers. So definitely see it as an evolving trend.
Okay. And then more on the cultural side, I guess I'm personally kind of curious about this. Having just moved over from, you know, the United States, I'm wondering culturally, is the business different? I know a lot of Americans say that, you know, people in France, for instance, I used to live there, tend to be rude and they don't like to talk to them or things like that. Are there any, you know, business culture things that you think entrepreneurs or people interested in working internationally might want to know about?
Yeah, I don't know if one specific thing jumps out. I think the markets are certainly like all a little bit different in terms of preferences, from like a product design to, you know, all of the more cultural elements that tend to differ company to company. I will say, like at Plaid, we do a good job of setting an inclusive and strong culture for all of our offices. You know, I moved 5 hours ahead in time zone, and I don't feel like I've taken a material hit in terms of like the ability to communicate with my coworkers and my day-to-day involvement in their lives. So I think internally, we do a really good job of making sure all of the offices are connected. And then externally, so much of our jobs anyway is listening to what our customers say, and all of their asks are quite different, that like we don't see a ton of geographic trend on that. It's mostly just like all of our customers are somewhat unique. They all want slightly different things from us. We should take them all seriously.
Okay. And so what would you say are, maybe for Plaid in specific, maybe in Europe or maybe in general, like moments where you felt like this is a milestone, like we've really been successful? Like there are some companies that you've worked with on your website. Are there any of them that you're particularly proud of? Any partnerships in specific?
No, nothing in specific. I mean, we're really proud of all of our customers. I think particularly, like I was saying, you know, it's not like we don't value companies with thousands of employees feedback differently than we value companies with 2 employees. Like the core thesis for how we build things is that it matters what the developer experiences when they integrate with Plaid. So all of the feedback is important. In terms of like overall milestones, again, we've been enabling open finance in a lowercase way for years in the US. Come a really long way there and gotten to work with some incredible companies. I think it was an important milestone for us, you know, roughly a year ago now, when we first launched in the UK and started expanding into Europe. But again, we're much smaller over here, so we're really excited for that to be like the first initial milestone.
Okay, so do you think then that Plaid is looking to go even further than Europe afterwards?
No concrete plans at the time or anything.
All right, focusing on Europe for now. Well, that's exciting. That means I get to do more cool things, so that's fine with me.
Yeah,
For the focus to be here for now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting then. And you did bring it up before that the culture is really good and that's important. And I guess I'm wondering, because a lot of people, especially who are interested in our society, because we tend to be a career society, tend to be thinking, do I want to go into a more conventional career? It'll be easier to explain over, to my parents at the dinner table. I won't have to answer any confusion or anything like that. Or they're thinking, do I want to move into something that's more like fintech? So for someone who's like consulting, investment banking, or do I want to move into something like Plaid? How would you sway them away from, I guess, the more conventional choices?
Yeah, I wouldn't try to sway them away from more conventional choices. I would say like whatever you do be something that you want to do and you're really interested in it. Pull out the threads that you think are interesting. In terms of like how I personally think about what we do at Plaid, I think a lot in terms of like impact. It's really cool to see a customer that doesn't have any end users get really big over a year or two. And be able to say things like, they save their customers on average 20% of their budget per week. Or they're able to give like 1% cash back on purchases or things like that. So a lot of our customers have been able to do that. We have been sort of on the back end of them being able to do that. And it sort of all goes to our mission of making money easier for all of our end users.
Okay. Well, I feel like I think a lot of people have learned a lot more about open banking, and I think there will be some people typing Plaid into Google now moving forwards, especially hearing that you're hiring. I think for a lot of people, that's an interesting thing to consider. But if you had to leave any final takeaways, I guess, with the students who might be watching or some people who might have companies that are considering maybe they should be partnering with Plaid, if you have any final takeaways, that would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. My biggest takeaway, like I was saying, is like follow what you think is interesting, read as much as possible, and then ask questions whenever you're able to. We love getting like feedback from people that are or not using the product on like what's good about the site and what would you change. And like as long as you're speaking passionately about something that you're actually interested in, that's really useful for us to hear. So don't be afraid to reach out. All questions are good.
Great. So people can find you, I'm assuming, on the website, on social media, or?
Yeah. All places.
Great. Okay. Well, then with that, I think we're happy to thank you very much for having been here to speak with us. I hope a lot of people will then go find out some more about Plaid. I personally think it was really exciting. And hopefully here at UCL FinTech, we'll be hearing more from you and your team during the upcoming academic year. Fingers crossed, there'll be some more normality, so it'll be easier to organize things. But for the moment, we'll be putting this up online as well, so more people can find out. But thank you so much for being here, Zak Lambert from Plaid.
Awesome. Thanks for the time. See ya.